Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. Hey. Thank you so much for coming to join us for this Higher Ed Technology Meetup. And thank you so much for Deborah and Curry for hosting it and having so much to organize it and bring people together. The purpose of the Higher Ed Technology Meetup is to do just this, bring people together, hopefully, get some collaborations going across universities, do some networking, do some information sharing. We purposely avoid any types of sales conversations in the room because, again, our purpose is to do good and to make a difference to higher ed. We have at least 5 or 6 people on the call. So I want to make sure that folks on the call, you can still hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to pass it on to Deborah, and she's going to provide a little bit more context and information about the actual program, and maybe she's going to ask for some introductions.
Great. Welcome to Curry College, and so thank you for coming this morning. And I've been at Curry, I'm the CIO of Curry. I've been here for 2 years, and I spent a long time career at LaSalle College for 19 years. I oversaw technology at LaSalle, and then we had this consortium of IT departments where we also oversaw the technology IT department at Pine Manor College, and then LaSalle had a separate organization called LaSalle Village, which was a continuing care retirement center. So then I decided one day, why don't I make a jump and try something different? Actually, the real reason is when overseeing a consortium, I lost what I felt was it started feeling like a business, and I somewhat lost the connection to the institution's mission, and I missed it. And that's what I love about this field, is connecting the technology with the mission. So I found my way over to Curry. I've been to maybe 3 of these sessions, and I like getting out of the office and seeing new things that people are doing, having conversations, meeting other people in the field. So I said, I'll host one. So here we are today. And AI, machine learning is an interesting topic to me, and something I've been doing a lot of research on, and I'm really interested in what other people are doing it. So I picked my 4 favorite projects / people / products that I've been keeping my eye on. One of them happens to be a project that we're doing. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to kind of get a little kind of Reader's Digest version, quickie view of what these people are doing, and then if people are interested, they can reach out to them directly. Great. So I'll introduce Andrew. Excellent. Good.
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay. So Curry College moved our CE grad program over to Salesforce about a year and a half ago. And then we use it for marketing and admission all the way through enrollment. And about 6 months ago, Brian said, there's this cool product from Salesforce called Einstein Prediction Builder. And why don't you give it a try? And so when I started doing some research on it, I felt like we had enough data to start seeing if we could use AI to predict where we can move people through the funnel. Traditionally, and the way that Curry set it up is that we set up, our own criteria of what we felt was a student who would enroll, but this is based off of information that we knew. So what I wanted to do is compare what we knew and what we predicted versus what the data says. So we engaged 5HD to help us set up Salesforce Prediction Builder in our environment with our CE grad program, and Andrew's going to tell you more about that project.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, we've been working with CE grad for a while at Curry. We just started working with undergrad. And sorry about the slides there, but we'll scroll through them over here and we'll make it work. Okay, so this is the case study of our work with grad and continuing ed. As it applies to Salesforce, we help them from the beginning get the data model all set with the contacts. They have a project with Enrollment RX too to get everything going with Salesforce. So we picked up after some of that work and helped them with reporting, helped them with a lot of marketing attribution. So we've definitely seen great things from the Einstein Prediction Builder, and that's why we were excited when Deborah was wanting to launch the pilot there, because it was a really great opportunity for us to engage with them further. So going back to 2017, grad and CE was still using a paper application, so people would fax it in, they'd drop it off at the office. There wasn't a lot of metrics there on how long it took somebody to actually write the application and drive it over to the office, or whether people still have fax machines or not. So it was a big move for them last year, bringing it over into Salesforce.com or .org. And then also launching Pardot at the same time as the app portal went live with the Enrollment RX package there. So big launch last May, and then moving forwards, they've been building up data on the platform, running everything through there over the last year. And so this summer was a great time to launch that Einstein pilot. You had the basic data there, you had enough to kind of make it actionable and make some test predictions and run through the pilot pretty productively. So that's where we were at this summer with that pilot. So one of our first goals there was, we had all these different things that we could predict with Einstein Builder. Where do we start? So what we wanted to do was predict intent and time frame, because those were most actionable towards the marketing efforts that we were doing. So if we bring in this giant pool of leads, how do we classify them into people that are ready to start today, ready to get into the next course, and people that might need a little bit more time, whether they're waiting on their nursing license or they're waiting on some other prereqs. Maybe we send them some information now, but then really they're going to engage with us next year or 6 months down the line. So we built out these objectives. So we wanted to validate the performance of the models that Einstein gave back to us. How valuable were those predictions, and did they actually line up with the information that we were seeing in terms of real life measurements from Salesforce? And then outline a plan that we could use those values from Prediction Builder to bring back into the marketing data and use that for developing segments in Pardot and messaging those lists kind of appropriately towards the prediction that was made for them. And then aligning kind of a long-term strategy around what data are we collecting in the contact objects, how is it structured, which information can we make predictions on now, what information do we maybe need to tweak a little bit in the future, how can we make sure that the advisors, the frontline people that are interacting with all of the recruits here are collecting data in the best way to support us for kind of long-term growth in that. And then from this pilot, look towards that long-term, larger scale implementation of how can we roll this out beyond just these initial two objectives, initial two measurements from Prediction Builder, and really scale it out across grad, and how might it apply to undergrad too across the school. So one of our first steps was to go through and to build out the first one over here. So this one was the likelihood to submit an application. So we've got the top predictors on the right over there, which pieces go into ranking that kind of score of out of 100, how likely is this person to submit. Those fields that Einstein picked up were the top factors in bringing that likelihood score in. So I didn't take screenshots of all the different wizard pieces going up to this, but this is the kind of end result. It gives you a nice quick summary of the prediction that it built for you. So the intent and that kind of how quickly is somebody going to start that application. That was one of the models that we put in there, and we wanted to check to see how did that compare to the actual days for somebody. And so in 2/3 of the time, that was within just a few weeks. So that's, as marketing people, that's great, because that helps us give context to all these people that we didn't have any idea for when they first came into the funnel. Short of asking them, when are you looking to register? Which is one more thing on our request for inquiry form. It's one more piece of information that the advisors need to ask for. And if we can infer that from an AI like this, it saves, it's one piece of information they could ask differently. So, maybe they don't have to ask that right up front. they can ask something else instead and really, save that communication for later to validate things that, we might have already predicted. So that's, yep.
I don't know if it's just okay to just ask questions here, but based on what Einstein predicted versus what you've done in the past, how accurate was it? Like, how far off were you from the data versus what Einstein was stating?
So we started with a small sample over here, and for the ones that we measured over here, we had 60% of them that were within those couple weeks of how long it actually took them to start that application.
I think the question is, what would we have predicted as far as whether they would have moved forward or not?
Oh yeah, that's great. We still need to look into that, but that's something. What we just had was the 2 measurements of the actual days in Salesforce and then Einstein. We haven't looked into like an individual review of each one of those records yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Where are the leads stored? Are they stored in Salesforce?
They're stored in Salesforce. Yeah, they're all stored in the contact object.
Okay, so you don't bring them over like Pardot?
Oh, yep. So they all live in Salesforce. They're also imported into Pardot, and there's a full sync.
Got them both?
Back and forth. The Enrollment RX contact model, everything's stored in the contact record, so we don't have that kind of conversion point where you bring somebody over from a lead to a contact. So we've been getting kind of creative with some of the ways that we're measuring that in the contact record.
That's one of the reasons I asked, because I've enrolled in RX too, and I have that.
Yeah. So you get creative, and the contact record works as long as you've got the kind of data model to support it. And so one of the things we actually built into the contact record was the concept of a recruit stage for CE grad, which takes into account about a dozen different factors from their contact record and gives a 1-letter score of, this is where this person is in the funnel. And how does that, what are the next best steps for this person? How do we communicate with them? So one of the, and a little bit off topic, but 2 seconds. One of the big challenges for CE grad is that, there's a huge gap between inquiry and app started, which is the 2 different admission statuses in Enrollment RX. So recruit stage helped bridge that gap a little bit, and it'll help play into the Einstein models as we're breaking those out. Because your inquiry pool is really 6 different groups of people at least. You're talking about people that are long-term interested, people that are short-term interested, and then people that are short-term interested but not yet qualified. So we kind of have a different conversation with them. So all the recruit stage factors help that and help train the model a little bit better too. So we have a better context of who are these 10,000 inquiry people, because they're not all ready to go tomorrow. So from Einstein, going back to the other model that we did, the likelihood to submit the app, that one that we were looking at before was how long until they start the app. So the likelihood to submit was some of the things that we were expecting. If you've gotten to the app page in Enrollment RX of that prerequisites, which is kind of closer to the end, you're more likely to submit the app. If you have marked as tuition reimbursement available from your employer, you're also more likely to submit the application, which definitely lines up with actual things we've seen in the past. And then the more days it's been since your inquiry, the less likely you are to submit the app, which also makes sense. Those stale leads might have gone somewhere else for a competitive program. So always looking at that factor of in those first few days of the inquiry, or the first, while they're still fresh, getting, as much communication in as we can for the ones that are most likely to convert. And that ties back into that time frame too, so that we're not messaging everybody with a really aggressive timeline if their intent was really to convert 6 months down the line. We want to message them at the appropriate time to be most effective. So looking forward, and we talked a little bit about some of this, but what we want to do from Einstein in long term is continue to build out these predictions, to continue to validate the accuracy, take back the results that we've got from Einstein back to the advisors and back to the CE grad leadership, to have the conversation about, do these match up with what you've seen in real life? How can we, help these predictions better assist the advisors as they're working on the front lines, to help them in their day-to-day, make this a much more powerful tool for them, because that's what's really most important. They're the ones that are having these conversations and what information is best. One of the things that we just added into the data model is kind of the key objections that somebody might have towards the program, and Einstein can be really great for predicting that as part of the model too. So if we have a key objection specified, if we can get towards a place where we know which pieces are most associated with that objection, how do we kind of mitigate those objections, whether it's cost or time frame or on campus versus online, how do we use the data to better inform the frontline people to mitigate those. And then using the Einstein metrics down the line to enhance benchmark reporting. So if we're looking at how many apps were expected to convert within 30 days or 60 days or 90 days versus how many did. And I think we got a little bit of a ways to go there in terms of validating the models and making sure that these are all completely accurate as much as we can before we get to that point of enhanced reporting. So that was the last slide we had. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I know this is you're starting this program this summer. So are you anticipating then taking the data that Einstein gives you versus your actual students that you weren't able to grab? Are you going to be able to then take that pool and then work on tweaking those numbers to a smaller number? So the data tells you lost 100 students. Real number is 85. Are you then going to be able to then work that number to find out through analytics why, to then mitigate that number even smaller for next time?
Yeah. I think the first thing we have to do is take that 85 and validate. Why was there that gap? Then once we've got that narrowed down, taking that 85 and building that into the model so that we can make sure to minimize that 85, from being lost in the first place. Yeah. Any other questions?
You went less than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
No, that was quick.
Yeah.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
So, Deborah, I'm sure your institution has certain values that they are benchmarking against, and you chose ones as well. Were you kind of looking at independent criteria or using what had been provided by Curry on what has been successful in the past, or what items are more meaningful when you're predicting that enrollment? Like, how did you set your top criteria? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so for this initial pilot, we picked out the ones that were most likely to have a success with the data we had for Einstein. So the likelihood to submit and the time frame, those worked really well with the predictions that Einstein had available and kind of was confident in based on the metrics we had in there. It's also the ones that were most actionable for us from a marketing perspective. So our main focus for this was marketing. There's so many other use cases down the line too that we haven't explored yet, even just in terms of retention and kind of long-term engagement. But marketing, since that's our main focus and that's the one we had the most data for, those are the ones we felt most confident.
Thank you.
What's the dashboard like in regards to principals that have an interest in this information?
So the dashboard right now is, there's the metrics and the score. We're looking into, or one of the future releases of Salesforce is the top indicators of individual records for what was a positive and negative driver. But what we're taking with these scores right now is rolling them in with traditional reports and dashboards to say, here's the number of people at a certain score, kind of the trending of those scores by program, by counselor, by campus. There's not a huge, there's a couple hundred records in here with predictions right now, so we're still getting more data to be able to roll those out to a broader scale, so we haven't built out too many dashboards around it yet.
So at one point, is it going to be real time? So that, say, the provost could just log in and just say, okay, this is what today's numbers look like versus yesterday's?
Yeah, that's our hope once there's enough data in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it's 2 years of data?
It depends on the number of records and the individual predictions. So
Right.
yeah.
So, right, we're just suffering from lack of data
Okay.
right at this point in time.
How much of that data do you think is going to be marketable in the sense of it's recoverable money? Do you think you'll be able to recoup that by tweaking it in the next 2 years? Because you're paying money into the system, so the ROA is kind of questionable right now. So at what point do you think you're going to break even and then make the money back?
So I would say the real money is the time and effort into it.
Yep.
It's not the license cost as much. So, I mean, do you have any sense? This is really a pilot for us, so we're not quite sure.
I know, and
So, I mean, this-
data is worth different values to different people,
Right.
so I'm just trying to quantify it, so to speak.
Yeah, I think one of the efficiencies that would generate some of the return there, and we haven't really looked into the financials of it, but it is the staff efficiencies of here's your most effective people for this type of messaging, and if we can refine that and save the advisors time and allow them to reach out more people and connect on a personal front, we'd have to quantify that a little bit with the dollars, but we haven't got there yet.
Sorry. So Carol Thomas is from New England College, And I met Carol at a conference and also heard about her through Brian and the work that she's doing in Salesforce, and as it relates to in the area of finance, which I'm also fascinated with as well. Financial aid?
Yes, finance.
Financial aid, sorry. Financial aid. So I thought, I have not seen this presentation, but I thought, oh my goodness, I definitely want to see what is happening with AI and financial aid, because that's an area that if you move the needle a little, you can, really pick up on revenue. So,
Sure.
thank you.
So thank you for having me today. And I've got my timer going because anybody who knows me knows I can wax on for a long time about this. So first, to give you a little context. I mean, obviously the applications that we use are always in the context of the culture and the goals of the organization. So at New England College, we're a small private liberal arts college in Henniker, New Hampshire. We are one of the few, I think, in New England that can proudly claim growth mode. We've had 3 years of record enrollment in our undergraduate liberal arts programs. We have been very successful with our first capital campaign, which is well over goal, with a second one planned to be started in January. A lot of that is brought about as a result of our president, Michelle Perkins, who is a highly entrepreneurial president, who also has a very strong background in enrollment management. So my job at the college started out as the CIO. I came back. I had been the college's first CIO. I left for 10 years to go into consulting. And in her magical way, Michelle Perkins twisted my arm slowly and gently until I came back to take the position I said I would never do again. Then, I guess the reward for good work is more work. I became the Vice President for Technology and Marketing Communications, which also includes all undergraduate admissions and graduate admissions all report into me. So I have this sort of magical power of having all these typically siloed areas of the organization that report into me, and I have the goal of not only maintaining a strong and robust technology environment, which did not exist 4 years ago, and managing enrollment to meet our institutional revenue goals, as we are a 98% tuition-dependent institution. So that's a little bit about us. We just completed a very successful merger. It's wonderful how the press covers the not successful mergers, but not so much the successful ones. We merged with the New Hampshire Institute of Art, which is located in Manchester. It is now a division of New England College. So we now have 2 campuses, a rural campus in Henniker on a beautiful river, and some of you have been there, Brian and Christopher and Lucas, and others. But we also have a urban campus in the largest city in the state of New Hampshire. So just to talk about a little bit, I'm going to focus mostly on undergraduate enrollment, a little bit about financial aid, but mostly about admissions. We are one of the few schools that has opted to move away from Slate. If you're in admissions, you know Slate is it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I will be happily talk to you about why it didn't work for us. And moved to salesforce.org and Enrollment RX 2 years ago for our graduate programs, and this past January for our undergraduate programs. We combined that with a cloud-based integration tool called Jitterbit, which Enrollment RX had developed a banner integration with that was absolutely key and remains absolutely key to the success of our implementation, is being able to quickly, pretty much in real time, exchange data. It's a matter of seconds between Salesforce and Banner and back again. And that's where the financial aid piece comes, because we pull a bunch of financial aid data back into Salesforce and use that as part of our modeling. We also extended the environment with Pardot, which is one of the marketing automation tools. And that is what we're using right now to accomplish one of our other bigger goals, which is what analytics drives to. I'll talk about that in a minute. So one of our goals for this year for the class entering in fall 2020 at the undergraduate level was to reduce what I call the top of funnel costs. So if anybody's been in admissions in a liberal arts college, you know you go out and spend a whole boatload of money with a consultant to manage your communications to a whole boatload of names, and then you sit back and wish and hope and think everything's going to work well and depend on their predictive models, which may or may not work because they may or may not have access to all the relevant components of the data. So we decided this year to go it alone. Telling your boss who's an enrollment management specialist that you think you can actually do it without Royal or Fire Engine Red or Noel Levitz or somebody like that, do it yourself. You reallocate those funds to managing that top of funnel was a conversation I had for a year, and a lot of planning and a lot of work going into it, and we launched August 22nd. And we are 40% ahead in applications this year, so.
I have to say, you were just the front edge of disruption.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I would use the F word, but I won't. It's a big deal because this is where schools spend a lot of money in the enrollment process without the insight into the data to know, A, am I buying the right names? B, what's the possibility I can actually leverage these names? So just to give you an idea of volume, and I don't want to get too much into admissions. Oh, wait, I'll come back to that. To admissions, but typically we purchase between 200 and 250,000 names. This year we've already purchased over 300,000. We're managing them through Pardot. We're managing them through a pretty sophisticated segmentation model, because one of the reasons for our success is that we recognized 18 years ago, a really nice long sales cycle, that the demographics were not in our favor if we stayed in New England. So we have had a long-term strategy to diversify. We are, one of the points I didn't make earlier, the most diverse campus in the state of New Hampshire, which isn't saying much in a state that's 8% diverse, but we're at 36% diversity, not including Asian Americans. So this is including Hispanics, African Americans, and Native peoples, including students from Hawaii of Native descent. So we're very proud of that. We're very proud of not only the diversity in terms of race and culture, but also the diversity in conversation, the diversity in geography. It's really part of who we are. So that has come about very intentionally through enrollment management, but we didn't have the tools that we really needed to get to this point. So I'll come back to undergraduate in a minute, but we started with the graduate recruitment cycle. We run 6-7 week terms in our graduate program. And before we started with this model on the graduate side, we were taking a long time to make a decision because there was no automation in the decision process. There was no automated communication to graduate students about what they needed to provide for us. We run 32 different graduate programs, and each one of those programs has a different set of requirements. It's different for the doctoral program than it is for the MBA. We built all of that in Salesforce Enrollment RX, and we moved, the key number here is a 71% faster decision, our decision to the student, to matriculation. What that meant for us in real time was that in less than 7 weeks, we could get a graduate student enrolled. That may not seem like to people who are doing online programs that's a huge accomplishment, but for low residency and hybrid programs, where the decision cycle can be a little bit longer, and there's not a lot of tuition reimbursement going on these days, getting that to happen meant we were moving students earlier into the graduate revenue generation category. So for graduate admissions, we were really seeking to accelerate the time through the funnel, and there's a number of reasons that are spelled out here, but the critical metric was what I just shared. Differently, in the undergraduate, I don't even call it a funnel anymore. It's like a big cloud of things where we cast a very wide net, managing 300 to 500,000 names depending on how you look at it. Some purchased, some inquiries from a prior year, some junior search. We have both general brand-related communication as well as application generation communication, as well as segmented communications going out to these populations based on where they live. So communication with someone in Florida is going to be much different than a communication with someone in Minnesota. Minnesota students want to know we have a hockey rink and free skiing down the road. Florida students want to know how long it takes to get to the airport to get back to Florida. So, but we take that, we call this high volume, low yield, lots of names, generate lots of applications. Last year we broke 10,000 applications for the first time, almost at 11,000. This year we expect to hit about 15,000 apps in the combined institutions. We are not a selective institution. We, at the undergraduate level, we accept students based on a GPA. We are test score optional. So we work more like a community college in that regard. Not quite open enrollment, but fairly close. And so we accept a lot of those 15,000 students. The big nut to crack is that between those 10 to 12,000 accepts that we'll have, and the 500, which is our magic number in Henniker, which is the rural campus, and 120, which is the magic number in Manchester at the Institute of Art. I didn't update my slide to say that our goal for this coming year is 620 students. So, but in that piece between accepts and deposits or enrollments is really the sweet spot for analytics. So I'm going to skip a few other things and talk about our analytics environment. So we use 3 components of the Einstein tool set. to respond to changes operationally through analytics, to predict or understand what we should be doing with this vast volume of names that we have and how we should be buying those names through discovery. And then we're just now launching Prediction Builder to build out forecasts, because through that enrollment funnel, I mentioned earlier the storminess between accept and enrollment, we're asking people to do forecasting. We're asking our admissions folks to do forecasting. So this year we'll have 3 different forecasting models running in addition to the coaches, the financial aid counselors, and the admissions professionals to help us forecast what the actual number is going to be. We're actually asked to land on a dime, and if I could recount for you, the 2 days before orientation are like the most stressful days of the year, and it's very hard to land on a dime without some of this forecasting information. So we use Prediction Builder and Salesforce, which we're just now rolling out, and then we have 2 other purchase products that we're using in order to do something I heard back here, comparing results. I'm bold, but I'm not that bold. I don't really fully want to go it alone. So we have 2 other vendors that we're working with to use their predictive models to see which one of them comes the closest to the actual result. When we see that, then we'll know how to blend those for next year. This is where the financial aid piece comes in. So ultimately, I want to be able to use the analytics products to help us manage discount and also help us really understand the true revenue picture. Right now, it's kind of split between what we do in admissions and what's done in financial aid. There's one other school that's done a phenomenal job of using the Salesforce environment to do that discount management, which is important to us. So we're kind of going to steal from them or borrow from them. What do we do in higher ed? Steal or do we borrow? But really use that model. So we've started that this year by bringing over much more financial data than we've ever had. Not only did they apply for financial aid, what's their EFC, we know what their merit package is because we assign that. But what is the gap? What is the gap that we're talking about compared to the typical student in that category, in that financial category? So we serve a lot of students with a very low EFC. It's a hard model, even with a hefty discount, to manage what they need to pay us. And so figuring out what makes the most sense in order to be able to serve both the lower EFCs, but also be able to also serve the students who don't need our money, other than the merit money, to really make college work for them. So that's kind of in the ballpark for the future. So in analytics, I've spent the last year building out longitudinal data sets across multiple data sources. I mentioned earlier, I had 6 months of undergraduate data in Salesforce right now. That's not enough to do much of anything with. So I needed to bring in 3 years of prior data. So I've got almost 1 million records that are coming in from prior data sources, primarily from Slate, and also the gazillion spreadsheets that we have. I've pulled all that data in, because one of the bigger challenges for us is being able to do year-over-year comparative reporting. If I give the president a number and say, "Gary, we got 1,400 apps," what was it last year? It's a great number, but a point in time doesn't help all that much. And so being able to turn that into actionable insights, and again, this becomes our scholarship modeling. What does it mean we need to provide in terms of merit scholarships in order to yield? That's something a lot of people purchase the service to do that modeling. That's one of the things that we want to do. We also want to streamline the access to those insights to key administrators and decision makers, because they're always looking at this data. Yeah.
So you had 1 million sheets of applications, or 1 million data?
I had 1 million records of data that were useful in an analysis. That's pretty much all the names we ever bought, plus all of the inquiries, and inclusive of all applications and enrollments over about 4 years.
That was already in another system?
It was in Slate, and we had to pull that data out. We also have the original data files for any names that we've purchased, but pull that into a massive data set on the analytics side that then I could slice and dice, look at over time, look at comparatively, and really show what was really happening in some of those, show yields by data source, yields by GPA range, yields by test score range, all those kinds of things.
So is that undergraduate and graduate?
I keep them separate. The graduate behaves very differently, and it's a very different model. So, as I said, in Discovery, we partnered with Salesforce to help us do a pilot. We wanted to take a look at 3 of those 4 years. When I did this, I just had 3 years worth of data to use the Discovery product, which is the second product in the Einstein suite that we use, to really, in the first case, verify anecdotal beliefs. Okay, so people believe if you give students this, they'll come. I'm not sure that's true, so let's test that out. So Salesforce, through their strategic services partnership, helped us look at the data and let the data tell the story. And we're still refining what that means. Did verify some of the analytics. Students who deposited at a certain point in time from a certain application source at a certain income level have a likelihood to stick differently than others. So that's my 15-minute notice. And we still have a lot of data to clean up, and this is a process that's very iterative. So we're really using that to inform us, but not direct us, if that makes sense. Right. So this is some of the questions that we asked in the discovery stage. We wanted to look at an analysis of our search data to see the outcome. I don't know if you can read it, but the outcome is the 4th column in. Says the first test we wanted to do was how could we maximize the applications. Now everything else I was really interested in was how can we maximize the enrollments. So every other discovery data set really looked at that. It looked at different sets of data to begin to answer those questions. And what I just said is very true. We've got hundreds of data elements to look at, hundreds of results to really analyze, and so we continue to iterate and revise those and review them for meaningfulness. There's a lot of data, but what does it really mean, and what of it is actionable? And again, I said the prediction builder is in progress. Our intent is to build out prediction builder to be used by individual counselors to help them to organize their work, right? So if I get 15,000, I didn't give you any of our staffing levels. If I get 15,000 applications, I've got 7 counselors who'll be working that, 2 of whom specialize in the BFA, which is from the New Hampshire Institute of Art. So 15,000 applications divided by 7, that's more than 2,000 per counselor. How do they know how to prioritize their work? Well, Prediction Builder at the very front end will be one of those things that will help them, along with instinct and knowledge. One of the things Discovery told us, validated the anecdote that if a student comes to campus, they have a higher likelihood of yielding. I don't think that would be a surprise to anybody, but what is the real value of that? And that's what we were looking for. And what is the real value of that in combination with other factors that help to build out the prediction? So our work in Einstein Analytics continues to really focus in recruiting and admissions with the financial aid piece, and that's a little bit more detailed, but that really is very important to us, building out the dashboards that we need and really using the services that are available to us. So here's some of the ways that we got here. We use strategic services from Salesforce. We are a premier support customer, so there are tons of great accelerators that helped us jumpstart this. Obviously, Trailheads. There's a recently released analytics and discovery trail mix and certification, which I'm in the process of completing. But I think the most important thing is to give yourself time. This doesn't happen with a push button. There is no easy button for this, and I tell that to my boss all the time, who still wants, the analytics yesterday, because you really want to be sure, and this will come as no surprise to you as technologists, that the underlying data is correct. And that's often where I have spent a lot of my time. Why is this applicant looking like an inquiry when they're really an applicant? Where are they in the stage? What button didn't get pushed to move somebody through? So really spending the time to know that, or to be able to expect a certain margin of error, which I haven't come up with yet, so I don't have to spend all my time there, but or my staff doesn't. But yeah, it's really important, and really knowing how to get help is essential. I won't go into that. You guys know all that, and I'll stop here. Yeah.
On your graduate program, where you had a 71% increase
in time for
Yeah. So how much of that was based on students going through the online program, so that you can make a quicker decision versus those that were going to be on campus?
We don't run any residential graduate programs fully. We run low residency, hybrid, and a handful of online. So it really was, modality wasn't the issue, it was really schedule. Yeah, for us.
So Daren, I also printed out the article about you guys. They're on the table. As I had mentioned before, I learned about Daren through this article. We had a quick chat about what he's doing, and he's just going to present it again today. So go ahead, Daren.
Okay, so thank you guys for trying to be there in person. But I really am excited about talking about the use of AI here at Wayne State. I don't know that we've done anything all that innovative. However, we have sort of tried to push the boundaries of what the existing technology can do, and then also looking for ways to extend it to be present. So, really quickly, let's jump into it. I think you guys have seen probably an article from either Educause Review or somewhere else, likely quoting enrollment management agency down that way, regarding how we do our partnership with the Meetup to support incoming students. And so, in a nutshell, that project was really designed around increasing application and yield activities in the summer, targeting the incoming students, and really trying to figure out a way to use technology to extend our already sort of strapped and under-resourced staff to be able to better answer questions of incoming students. And so the partnership with the Meetup started, and we were able to create what we call W, the Warrior, which is a conversational AI chatbot. And while students understand that it is definitely not a live human, they are appreciative of its ability to answer sort of those run-of-the-mill basic questions. And the fact that it's on all the time and they're there 24/7 has been a great benefit to sort of meeting the students where they are. Because as you all know, not everybody's going to be able to ask and receive answers from 9 to 5. And so having a facility where we don't have to necessarily pay overtime for individuals, but still be able to be responsive has been really good. And again, we were able to see some positive results in terms of increased application numbers, increased admit numbers, and actually increased enrollment from some key groups that we were targeting in terms of Pell eligible and first-time in college first-generation students as well. So kind of from that, I think moderately successful deployment, we were able to receive another grant from the ACLU to expand this sort of chatbot service out to the community, large community in the city of Detroit. There's an estimate that states that we've got about 700,000 people in the city and sort of metro area that have some college but not a college degree. So the idea was to deploy an additional chatbot service to answer questions about what it would take or the opportunities available to extend or rejoin sort of a higher education pathway for those types of individuals in our city. So that service was launched called Spirit, and that there is a famous statue in downtown Detroit called the Spirit of Detroit. So that service has adopted that name of Spirit, and it's called Detroit Ed 411. And it's really around focused on answering those key types of questions that individuals may have surrounding the facility into higher education. So that just got started earlier this year. So we're still watching and seeing what the results should be, whether that'll be sort of increased enrollment from those types of individuals that are on campus, and that would be a great, obviously great outcome, but that's not necessarily why we're doing it. We're trying to do it just to increase awareness and really support interested parties in the city. So the third thing that we're trying to do, that we're getting started actually this fall, is the 9th Division of Computing and Information Technology. We're going to be leveraging a chatbot with some ID AI to work at our university student help desk. So initially, with the Meetup partnership, our plan was to actually try to pilot something for with that technology, but early on we noticed that there was probably going to be a better use of our resources if we focus on getting the enrollment management one launched and focus our attention on that. So given that, we thought, okay, we know how the Meetup tool set works, let's see if we can find another tool set that offers slightly different capabilities that may be useful for both our technology help desk and also sort of other help desk or student-facing support services across campus. So we entered into a partnership with IVAI, and we're looking to get things up and running sometime this fall. Likely November timeframe before everything gets up and running, but so we're kind of excited about that. Not till our next deal. And just to conclude, we have some ideas around the potential for deploying additional bots, just for use of mentioned, but we're really looking for a customizable platform that we could deploy on campus and then sort of technical delegate authority to other individuals who can be able to build the question and answer tool set to then be able to set those boxes on the questions that may be coming into a particular office. And so we're really kind of in search of that next evolution of AI that we can really fully customize and easily deploy. We do have concerns though. We got concerns about the overall cost of these solutions. As much as everyone wants to say that, sort of, salaries bump in and they're cheap, they're not as cheap as they could be. It's still, in general, cheaper to deploy sometimes a student to answer these questions rather than, just pieces of technology. And then we're also concerned about the overall intelligence and ability for the tools to adapt and grow and develop on its own without input from us. So that's something that people have promised, but we have yet to see it. So it seems everything at the bot knows, it knows from us, and everything new that it learns, it has to learn from us as well. And then the last thing is we're kind of concerned about overall bot fatigue and,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, so just to recap, the second thing that we've done is this sort of community member deployment of an AI tool, and that is also in a partnership with the Meetup, and we got a grant from the APLU. We call it the Spirit, named after the Spirit of Detroit, and it's for community members interested in re-engaging in higher ed. And then again, to restate, we're about to start a pilot at our own computing help desk with IVAI this fall. We're trying to just evaluate the effectiveness of the tool and to see how quickly it can ramp up and how effective it is at answering, sort of a larger set of questions and answer pairs. And then finally, just talking about potential and another concern. We're looking to be able to deploy additional bots if we can. Primarily, we'd like to be able to have a platform that we could then sub-delegate out to different departments so that they can create their own question and answer pairs and have bots sort of work for them. There's even an idea to even deploy these to faculty potentially, so that in that beginning of semester crush, when folks are always asking the same questions around their syllabi and how classes work, what if a bot could just answer all those and record the conversation, saving the faculty from having to do that repetitive dance of, yes, assignments I do on Friday, no, I do not accept late work, or, my favorite, groups should be 2 to 5 people, and no, you cannot have one person in a group because that's not 2 to 5 people. So we're hoping that those things will become a reality for us very shortly here, but we have yet to really see technology available to be able to sort of enable that. So we're kind of waiting like everyone else. And really, that's all I've got in terms of presentation. I was hoping leave enough time for discussion and to really take any questions from sort of members there that are interested in the topic.
I definitely have a few questions.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. That was great. Two things I'm wondering about. First, how did you identify and populate your questions? How did you identify the ones that you're going to have frequent questions about, or ones that are so sensitive or in some other way that you knew you needed to have that in your slate of questions? Kind of how did you approach that? And then on the other side of that, how are you handling the privacy part around this particular application? Thank you.
Sure. So the question and answer pairs were selected based on their, frequency and the presence of them in the standard website for that question. And then the other thing that was done was to sort of go through and sort of role play what an incoming student may have and think about the progressional order of questions and make sure that, at least a conversational approach would have, likely one or two different conversation threads, and then, sort of question and answers inside those threads. So they tried to build the response queue, if you will, kind of based on that. In terms of privacy, one thing that we tried to do is separate out incoming sort of prospective students from admitted students. So prospective students just kind of got the generic question set. Actually, admitted students will log into another portal with their access ID and password so that we know that it was them, and then allows the bot to answer questions about their record. Now, just real basic stuff like, did you receive my document? Yeah. When is the deadline to turn this in? Based on what you've already submitted, you need to turn it in at this point. So again, the overall intelligence of the bot, it's not like something you see on TV. It's very, very, very much basic. And you have to make those decisions around how much you're going to let the answer sort of unauthenticated when, pick up the wall as to and bridge to an authenticated session. And even that has problems because with the AdmitHub solution, like it's required, I think, at this point to they bake their stuff into Facebook, and so Facebook Messenger, and so that's how, you kind of have to leverage that tool set, which is a problem in and of itself that we're kind of stuck on that technology. But it's a way, sort of a means to an end. So we're trying to look for other alternatives, which is why we're kind of excited about this partnership with IBAI to see if there's a different way to do it.
Great.
I've got a couple of questions. One is, as this is supposed to be AI, is there an element of self-learning that's happening with this system? And how do you measure the increased efficacy of the system?
So in terms of self-learning, there is a limited amount of self-learning that happens. Now, it is sort of what you would imagine it to be in terms of it'll say, okay, did that answer your question? And you say yes, it says, okay, great. And it records that as, sort of an optimal question and answer pair. Now, where we have seen some issue is that when it can't answer the question and it kind of searches through, those interactions we found to be not necessarily as quick as we would like, and in terms of the consistency of once it figures out like, oh, this is what you mean, and now I'm going to give you this answer set instead of this other one. We've had sort of limited success on that as well. Now, on the flip side, the potential answers from some of the questions that we are getting from an incoming student perspective are so limited that you can very easily kind of map out a variety of question and answer trees, and then make sure that at least that the AI tool has that in its quiver, at least to fire back. But in terms of being able to evaluate just how effective it is, it's something that we have to look at, and we need a better metric than what they provide us, which is very limited at this point. Now, I will say that students who use the tool, are happy to get any kind of answer, because, the alternative is to send an email and wait, a day or so to get something back, where it has an immediate impact on their anxiety and stress of, okay, I just need somebody to answer something. So it's sort of that balance that we try to strike between, it may not be the perfect tool, and it may not have all the answers, but it does satisfy the need for students to have immediate feedback and really feel like the institution is responding to them, supporting them. But that is a concern we have, like how well can we train this thing, and can we see those results in a meaningful way in terms of reporting? And that's something that I think we're working with enrollment management locally to then press at the hub to be able to provide.
I'm just wondering if you have a place where parents can enter this to get answers to questions. I heard prospective students and admitted students. A lot of our questions obviously come from parents.
Yeah, so I think on the prospective student side, the parents can ask questions there, but we don't have a proxy tool set up yet that will allow parents to ask questions for admitted students. And that's a sort of a new frontier that I think we're probably going to reach into, particularly when it comes to some of the other services like financial aid and housing, where there may be some parent interaction that is necessary. And so, again, I don't know that the hub tool is going to be the one that we use for that, but that is something that's on our roadmap to try to solve, deploy.
Thank you.
Just got a piece of it. This was very much on my mind because I've just been dealing with a major UK bank that is using this technology. And your point of concern, which is fatigue, bot fatigue, I'm at the verge of closing my account with them based on my experience with this technology.
Yeah, I think that concern, it kind of stems from, effectively that when someone calls in and they have a question that's too complex for the bot to answer, and they really want to exit out of the tree or the conversation to get to a human. Now, unfortunately, if that conversation is happening at 2 in the morning, like, you can't get to a human at that point. So we've got to figure out some good sort of good solutions to what happens when people just get tired interacting with the bot and they want a human, and to be able to effectively meet their needs so that they don't go away unhappy, sort of in the middle of the night by themselves. Or even worse, trying to say, on Twitter, Wednesday has a spot, it didn't answer my questions, it's dumb, I'm going somewhere else. So those are concerns we have, and we've sort of seen, I think, some of the things around on the fringes, but to be fair, it seems like incoming students are kind of a nicer population. I think when we start to deploy this to our current students, they may be a lot less forgiving. So that's where that concern is born from. I hope that answered the question. I couldn't hear it exactly.
No, that's good.
My name's James. I have a question. So with the bot, you ended up saying you had a 14% boost. But I'm curious, what do you anticipate the forecast that the bot's going to give you for the next year to the next year after that, et cetera? I mean, is it going to substantiate the cost of putting out more bots?
Yeah, that is the $64,000 question. As we looked at the stats for this year's enrollment, we were slightly down, but we held steady in those populations that we saw growth in, particularly from the support of the AI tool set. And so I don't know that growth like that is sustainable, particularly given the demographics in in the area that we plan. However, in just 2 years in, we have seen pretty good stability, and so the only thing that we can surmise from the data we have is that it's definitely not hurting us to have the tool set available to answer questions, because the alternative would be that students would ask or send a mail and not get any kind of support and likely melt away to someone else's institution. So in terms of the metric, that's how we're viewing them. Demographically, there's just not much room for us to grow. So in essence, holding steady is growth in this marketplace for us.
Okay, thank you.
I think you have a hard stop at 9:10. We don't have any more questions. So thanks a lot, Daren. I appreciate it. Sorry about the technology in the beginning there, but I really appreciate joining us today.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate being asked to join, and again, apologies that I couldn't be there in person, but it seems like you guys have a nice group, a working group, and if there's anything else I can participate on, let me know.
Great, well done. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye. All right, now Dustin. And last but not least, favorite AI technology that I've been keeping an eye on, and actually Curry is working together to acquire Coursera as a tool. So about 6 months ago, I can't remember if Justin called me or he emailed me, and I never pick up sales calls because...
Probably both.
But he said something I thought was really interesting. First, he's a recent grad with a product, and I thought, and I thought, okay, well, hold on. Oftentimes I feel like we don't listen to our students. So he said, and I know somebody who went to Curry College, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, kind of like feel an obligation to talk to people who have a connection to Curry College. And then he just graduated fairly recently from Columbia, and my daughter goes to Barnard, and I'm like, I know Columbia. Let's see their stuff. So I spoke to Justin, and I thought what he said in about the first sentence totally turned my way of thinking, and probably what we often think when it comes to course scheduling. Usually we're just year to year, one. And they have turned this around in the way that they think about scheduling, and it's because I believe a student, a recent grad, has thought about this. So turn it over to you.
Thank you for the
Yes.
lovely introduction, Deborah. So I'd love to start by giving a little background on myself, the story of CourseDog, covering a little bit of what our insights were and how we partnered with some schools and leveraged AI today. But my story is about 2.5 years ago. I was actually a student at Columbia University, got frustrated during class schedule planning. At Columbia, a lot of classes were bundled up in primetime hours, mainly because of this faculty-driven culture where folks say, hey, I'm teaching Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. or whatever it might be at your institution. And it was also challenging because a lot of the computer science classes that I wanted to take as an aspiring tech entrepreneur nerd were always, it was really challenging to get into those classes that I wanted to take. What happened was, through this process of discovery, we learned a lot about how schools do class schedule planning. Traditionally, it's email chains and spreadsheet-based planning. Faculty come, they say, I'm teaching Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 p.m. Schools will go and they'll manually be coordinating. If you're decentralized, you probably have a lot of different stakeholders with their own agendas, giving their faculty the assignments they want, the times they want, whatever it might be. And then many schools, kind of have some sort of classroom optimization platform or some type of classroom management platform. But it's really interesting because your output's as good as your inputs. And so a lot of schools end up with significant space constraints, not because they don't have a good room tool, but because they have a scheduling problem. Because everything's bundled up in these hours, and because the inputs and what's happening at the faculty level is wrong from the start which creates this this downstream problem of we end up with this totally suboptimal schedule. So, and this ultimately results in a lot of different things, space problems, when we don't offer the right number of seats and sections, and we just leave this to individual folks within the university to come up with their own ideas about course demand in their head, it can result in suboptimal time to graduation and retention metrics. And ultimately, there's a lot of there's a lot of statistics and research that indicates that there's these things like bottlenecks, overloaded classes can result in less tuition revenue to schools. And ultimately, this is all kind of stems from this idea of faculty preferences. So what we did was working out of a lounge at Columbia University about 2.5 years ago, sweating away, cold calling folks like yourself around the country. We had this vision of building a single application that uses some forms of not the most advanced artificial intelligence, but of predictive analytics and AI to optimize for student success, incorporating these things like faculty preferences and space utilization, servicing errors, and not just being a classroom optimization tool, but being an end-to-end schedule planning platform. And so, basically, and I'll dive into what this actually looks like in a second, in 2.5 years, we've grown to 55 universities are using our platform. We've had a lot of universities that have seen significant increases in tuition revenue in addition to statistically significant impacts in student success metric and time reduction in building the schedule. And we're obviously very excited about the application at Curry. So I'd love to dive in and actually just give you a look at what it was that we came up with and how CourseDog, what we do and how we leverage artificial intelligence to create a better schedule. So it really starts, with this idea that most schools have this suboptimal time distribution of the schedule. They have these problems systemically in their schedule, and a lot of this lives in their heads. They have an idea that they have some sort of scheduling problem, but it's not very quantitative. The first thing that we do is we actually benchmark schools, and we get a sense of what are your key problems. The most significant ones are usually time distribution, bundled courses, space problems, and a culture where schedulers are going to their faculty and saying, what are you teaching? So that anytime you'd want to create a scheduling policy, the whole process breaks down because faculty entitlement and it just doesn't work. So what we do in CourseDog is we work with schools to create rules that ultimately feed into an algorithm that helps with scheduling. So an idea of a rule is, and one that's been cited a lot in best practice literature, is a primetime rule. Saying, hey, we need to set a benchmark for how many classes are we actually going to allow in these primetime hours from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. or whatever it may be in your university. Other types of rules, and what we'll actually do is we do A/B tests, where what we do is we literally look and say, hey, if we'd applied this rule to your previous schedule, what would have been the impact on space utilization, and also how much disruption would this have created? Because realistically, at some of your campuses, your faculty are just not, if you say, hey, now you're teaching at 9 p.m., it's not gonna happen. So we create all these different types of rules in our tool. Things like let's check for errors when people go in and make schedule. Let's set certain requirements about obviously standard time blocks for those of you that have them, and even do things like make sure that if you've got a bunch of students that have internships or are weird tech entrepreneurs like me, that we're not just offering all our classes at a time that's inconvenient for them. And so ultimately what this feeds into is we actually, as folks are building their schedule and as you go in and you run an optimizer, either at a department level or if you're a smaller school, maybe there's one person that's managing the entire schedule. We surface all of these errors in the schedule and we help to optimize around the constraints. So the idea of this platform is that traditionally you've got an Excel sheet, you've got some manual emails or whatever, you feed it into a classroom tool, and then you just kind of pray, and then maybe there's some negotiation or whatever. In this model, what we're actually doing is it starts with setting up the rules. schools can run an actual optimization at the department level that uses kind of like a genetic, it's not the most advanced AI in the world, but that uses a genetic algorithm to help make a lot of their initial assignments. For those of you that own rooms centrally and then have departments that do, time, instructor scheduling, this optimizes at the department level and at the central level as well. But the idea of this is that when folks then go in, to this platform, because we have these rules set up, we can automatically check before you optimize your physical space and before you make all your assignments to make sure that you're actually in line with your policies and your KPIs that you're setting for your schedule. So like a good example is in a traditional model, schools will go and they'll run an optimization tool, and because everyone's asking for classes at 1 p.m., the thing just doesn't work very well. And so in this model now, because it's end-to-end, we're able to provide alerts to schedulers in advance of that happening and even optimize around that. The one other concept that we really, any questions about that so far? Cool. I'm rocking it through this, but the one other concept, and then I'll touch on our other AI application in a second, that we sort of pioneered was this idea of best practices in terms of the way that schools ask about preferences and how they interact with faculty. A huge part of this problem, there have been optimization tools, AI tools that help with scheduling for forever. A huge part of the problem at an institution is the culture and the way that folks are asking for preferences and the way that at the start of scheduling, how do we, once we get that data in, build an optimal schedule without taking a lot of people off? And one of the things that we sort of realized is that there weren't really tools that helped with the process of even gathering the instructor preferences and helping schedulers to optimize around them. So what we do at CourseTalk is we actually have this concept of an instructor preference form. We have certain recommendations, like you should ask your faculty what times can you not teach as opposed to what times can you teach. Because if you ask what times can you teach, the whole thing breaks down if you ever want to create some type of optimal scenario. And in the current model, there's like very few schools that even think about this concept of asking faculty or what is actually happening in these conversations with faculty. And so by making it so that we're gathering data effectively at the start of this scheduling process, what happens is that now we've got a lot more space for potential assignments, and our optimization tool can work extremely effectively. So the last thing that I want to touch on, and there's a lot more baked into this because it's obviously it's an end-to-end tool, but so what I've showed so far is that this idea of policies and asking for preferences effectively and optimizing can help schools, to kind of build that optimal schedule from this instructor time room level. But another part of my problem as a student was getting into the courses that I actually wanted to take. And at most universities, it's sort of, people are just kind of guessing about things like demand and what students need to graduate, what students might want to take. So one of the things we actually do is we have a predictive analytics suite that's baked into our tool. And what it does is it uses machine learning to actually look at degree audit data in addition to historical enrollment trends and other factors from your student success ecosystem, whether that's the SIS, whether that's the degree audit application, whatever it may be. And we basically provide schools with, we know different campuses are going to have their own things, but the idea is that we provide a lot of out-of-box recommendations about places where, hey, you might want to cut the number of seats in this class, hey, you might want to cut the number of sections, or hey, you might want to add seats or sections to this actual class. And what's cool about this is we serve this up in an actionable format in the sense that for those of you that may not have control over those things, that may not, because a lot of schools have become very decentralized with their scheduling processes, what actually happens when folks start the creation of the schedule is the first thing they'll see is here's a list of the recommendations that we think you should take in your scheduling. You should eliminate this section. There's only going to be 2 students enrolling in it, and you're going to have a long wait list on this course. Why don't we better utilize this instructor and increase potential tuition revenue and lower our instructional costs? Or, hey, it looks like this class is really going to need another section because students need to take it. And so this idea of, predictive analytics and sort of looking at all these different factors to create a good model and then serving it up in an actionable way results in ground level changes to this actual systemic problem of people just finger to the wind saying we're going to have this many seats or this many sections in a given course. Cool. So those are the two main, and then we also do final exam optimization using some AI, where we do some things like looking at students' registration data to make sure students don't have 5 exams on the same day. But those are the 3 main AI applications that I wanted to touch on in the platform. I think that's pretty much most of what I wanted to cover today. Are there any other questions that, I guess I'll open it up to QA, but if you have any questions, you can email me, and also I have an email list where I talk a lot about, I just send clickbaity articles about AI in higher education and stuff like that. So if you ever want to shoot me an email. Yes.
It's very interesting that you talked about one of the issues being culture in different institutions. Culture maybe being the code word for privilege of instructors. And if you run into contractual issue where there's a collective bargaining agreement that dictates some of those things, then how do you factor that in?
Absolutely, and most schools will have some sort of contractual guidelines, or faculty need to teach, full-times need to teach 16 to 18 hours, part-times need to teach, between 6 and 8 hours, whatever it may be. These are all factors that we take into account in our software and that we actually treat as constraints. So, obviously there are cases where this is going to be the case and there are constraints that you can work around. We're just trying to, given all these different hard constraints, our predictive analytics suite and our optimization algorithms are going to try their best to accommodate those different factors. But yeah, if the problem is, if it's so constrained that, the faculty signs on teaching Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 p.m. in room 101, we're probably not the right fit. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was one of my questions. How do you take into account room configuration? I'm assuming you do special requirements for labs and
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the way that most campuses use this is departments will build their instructors and time schedules first, and then there's maybe a separate period of room optimization. And in that period of room optimization, we gather those preferences via the instructor preference forms, and then we look at all the different room features that we pull from the student information system and the constraints like, hey, lab classes need to be in lab rooms. The one thing that we built that I hated as a student, but that is a reality, is like you can set an instructor's optimizer priority to be super high to give them whatever room they want, but which is not a feature I liked, but yeah, so we look at all those different factors in the optimization.
Well, in our case, I need to be in the same building as my office and steps, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because our initial application was like, all right, let's build an optimal schedule, but some schools were just like, no, this is not how it works. That's not how we want to use this thing. And you're like,
well, my other question, I'm sorry, is what do students see? Is this where they would go to register?
No, so we are a totally administrator-facing platform at this time. So we also do curriculum and catalog management, and we're moving into student planning. But for right now, this is our core use case.
And then this would feed into the SFA?
Correct, that's correct, yeah. Yes.
Back when I was department chair 30 some odd years ago, one of the things I discovered looking at the system is that if I could convince certain high attraction faculty members to teach in time slots that were underutilized and maybe not desired by students, I could move things around that had huge impact. What about that? And that's an extreme example of manipulating, but what about that kind of thing? You have capabilities to manipulate the system in that way?
Yeah, and that's an amazing question. And what we actually have done with that is, because there's some folks, that some departments, power user departments, big departments that optimize everything in course line. There's others that will go and do some kind of manual assignments and that employ a similar model where they start with these big faculty and they figure out where can I place them. So what we do, one of the things that we actually do is that process is actually employed by many department heads around the country. They start by thinking, okay, how do I make the weird assignments, and then I'll start to assign my 1 p.m. classes. So what we do for those manual assignments is we actually we use this concept from behavioral economics called nudging to push to the top, given all the different time preferences, given all these different factors like the rules, constraints, time blocks. We actually push to the top the one that's not being used, but that could be a fit. So what we do is we reverse sort this, where if you see at the top, it's a little bit difficult to see, but it says that this time block has only been used 2 times, and then the ones at the bottom have been used 3 times. And so the idea of it is like, as opposed to what we want to do, and like the whole idea of the culture thing is like, we don't want people to go out of their way and have to think about policies, rules, constraints, and scheduling, because they won't do that. We just want to incorporate everything into their natural workflow. So like the optimizer is a way, it's like save time and the university gets better schedule. This is a way where it's like save time and also get better schedule. So yes.
Seems really cool. I'm curious, do you have a way of actually measuring impact of kind of before and after, both on space constraints and how those were opened up, as well as additional slots where maybe more students were able to get into a class, or kind of optimize the scheduling of those?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So right now, our main case studies and stuff like that have shown, just because we are a younger company, have shown increases in year-over-year space utilization, increases in like, it's difficult because measuring the retention and things like that is a difficult variable to extract from the noise, as you know. But we've heard, based on like student level surveys, we've gotten metrics that students feel like there's a little bit more availability in their schedule, especially at schools that created a policy for the first time. And then the one other metric is obviously schools have saved money and increased tuition revenue or reduced instructional costs, and we've seen that. But it's still a little bit early for us, just because we've only been really up and running for about like 2 years. Yeah.
So once you've created the schedule for the semester, the faculty log into this, or can we you have an API that ties into an LMS?
Yeah, so we have integrations with all the major SIS systems, and then usually the LMS interfaces with the SIS and pulls that data out. If you just use an LMS, we do have an integration partner that has done LMS integrations with us in the past, so, yeah. But we don't have a pre-built configuration. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm guessing that the data feed for this, you're really using the student information system primarily to bring in all the factors you can, and then set the criteria to optimize within.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's like we pull all of our data out of the student information system. We work with the policymakers, usually it's like a CIO or a registrar at the university, to create good policies. And then, we roll this out. And the other thing is that we've really built this to be like a fun platform for these end department schedulers to use. And so we have very high NPS scores with those. Like, that was really important to us because we recognize like clicking an optimizer button just is not the reality in most schools. Like, but yeah.
So can you save different iterations so that they can choose, okay, this is the best or the least pain, or however you want to look at that?
Yeah, you can run, most schools will do several runs, like they can run what-if scenarios using this optimizer, where they play with like the different bells and whistles, like, it's important for us to prioritize this factor and not this one as much. Yeah, great question.
A lot of the institutions with whom I work, especially say the art schools, the space allocation will not just be for academic courses, but will be for non-credential revenue generating practice space or banquets or things like that. So is that something that figures into this scheduling if you have those space resources for multiple purposes?
Yeah, weirdly, art schools really love us. I don't know why. Like,
it's a
yeah.
challenge. That's where a lot of money is made. No.
Yeah. It's really interesting. This is a great question. So yeah, we incorporate things like, studio classes need to go into studio rooms, things like that. Also, we have an events platform as well, which a lot of art schools have big problems with managing like the resources back and forth. So yeah, great. Yes.
Are you finding that a certain university is more open to this, to your software, than others? It's small, big, tiny. I'm doing some work at Northeastern as well as across the college. And very, very different cultures, and I can see this fitting in one but not the other. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think It's usually the type of people that are at like an AI conference that, you know, or look at like a 23-year-old and say, yes, you can do this, you know, but yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the truth of it is that we see our biggest and fastest growing client base are the very large decentralized universities that have massive problems because there's so many different users that are using this platform with their own ideas about what scheduling can be and can't be. And, you know, a lot of our big new ones like UCLA or Brigham Young University that just launched with us, that's like a big part of it. The other set of schools that we're really seeing emerging are the ones that want to optimize revenue related to scheduling and the ones that want to be very Moneyball-esque, right? It's the ones that are just very set in, this is how our culture works and it's not going to change, that would not be like a good fit for us, yeah.
So, are you allowing faculty to put in those preferences to identify that, and then is there like a chair or some other level individual that kind of looks at that department-wide or?
Exactly. So at the department level, they'd actually go in and just see, you know, their schedule, and they can collaborate with other users on it. And then when they go in and make their assignments, they'll just see their faculty and their faculty.
And they can kind of get more of that holistic department.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yes.
What sort of, again, it's a political question, what sort of level of support do you usually recommend within the university? Is this, it seems to me, it's like a marketplace, but it changes the dynamics of the market to give more equality between students and faculty in terms of demand and supply. I don't know if that makes.
Yeah. So sorry, could you just clarify the?
So I used to be a consultant. There were projects that we wouldn't accept without CIO or CFO, a certain level of, and this changes the dynamics between the faculty and the students. It's starting to, and the administration, all of them starting to come into play in this, it seems to be within this tool. But it's chiefly the faculty that are making more, perhaps, compromises in terms of what they are doing. So do you ask for a certain level of support within the university to help push?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the truth of it is that many schools just use our platform. Like, I even tell them, like, they're not, the initial reason why we did this is because we wanted to help schools transition to more student-driven and to more like Moneyball-esque scheduling, and not just like, you know, a time optimized, although this can be used as just like, okay, let's just save time. That's not at least what I'm personally motivated by when we got started by this. But related to your question, we almost always say, if you're going to get good ROI out of this platform, it also means that you have to consider the cultural value of it, not just like, it's not just a platform, right? And so we've had like many schools where we've said, look, if you're not ready to implement scheduling policies, is ultimately going to be an overpriced workflow tool. Like, you know, it doesn't make sense, right? But yeah, it's a good question.
So it's really governance that's wrapped into that. The governance structure that's going to drive it before that purchase or those decisions are made, as far as who really can negotiate those cultural changes, and if they're really governance changes.
Right, and to be fair, like we do have, like for example, Columbia Law School is just so faculty driven, they'll never have a change in culture, and they just run one big optimization and they save a ton of time. So, you know, but yeah, I think like in terms of the AI applications, at least, and what personally motivated us early on was, I think, this idea of helping schools to transition to culture.
Yeah, so building on Barbara's questions, I'm assuming like Brigham and Women's, you just said came on?
Brigham Young's launched with us, yeah.
So was your first question, was that, you're looking at this demo because you've just come up with the scheduling governance? Is this a new policy you're now implementing now, or are you now entertaining that thought? When does that question come up?
Yeah.
Because I'm from my school, faculty there would be pushback if you said this is what's going to be. Even though you're saying an optimization, well, I've always taught it now. But optimization, we would benefit from some additional students taking the class to slot different classes. But there'd be certain faculty that there would be pushback. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I mean, early on, like we were like a good entrepreneur, we had to. It's hard to see what happens until users use it, and so I wasn't like, I can't say day one of the company, I was like, you need to do scheduling policies before you take a shot on us. But like now, as we evolved and we're although I underplay, we've had a lot of growth, and now we're seeing the patterns for what is where are there schools, and we have had 100% retention, and you can outbound any of our users on the internet and they are happy, but we see the schools where they really see success and ROI are willing to do some sort of cultural shift along with the software. And so that is something now that we surface. Like I was just at Maryland, and I was just at University of Maryland and BYU Idaho earlier this week, and that's the first thing we told them. And we're usually asking schools to do some internal conversations about governance prior to implementing this tool. So that, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, anyway, thank you for coming today, and hopefully you learned something new about AI. As I mentioned, these are my 4 favorite projects that I like to keep an eye on. So, but we'll also look out for others if you want to forward them along. So, anyway, I think we were going to share email addresses, so through some type of email. So, if you want to reach out to me or any of the people here, feel free. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.